started. Okay, so this is a timeless, classic subject in the human experience. And I call it divine therapy. And it's all about getting in touch with that supreme intelligent force that's governing all of creation, and how we can communicate and talk with good form to that force, whether you want to call it like the supreme intelligence of the universe, the higher power, the creator, God, whatever term you want to use, it's all cool. It's all the same thing, right? So this is all going to be how to develop a greater sense of patience, a greater level of acceptance in life, how to develop a deep grounding sense of inner peace and security, to learn how to make the decision to be certain among uncertain circumstances, because your personal communications with the creator are a big part of your spiritual harmony, which is a big part of your human experience. And if you do this on a regular basis and you're crushing it, you're better able to face your day. And a lot of times people are confused. They're like, what should I say when I pray? I don't know what to say. Sometimes my prayers don't get the results I'm looking for. I don't know if I'm doing it with good form. What's the best form of prayer? All these other questions. It's like going to the gym and hitting the weights and trying to get stronger. People are trying to build their spiritual muscles and they're like, am I doing it with good form? I'm just doing it on whim and impulse without proper technique. I'm like, what's going on here? So do any of you have any thoughts on this subject? Why does it matter what form we use? What does it depend on? Like, what happens if we use bad form, good form? Any thoughts initially?
Well, for me, I look at the Bible is my ancient text for principles in living. And so I look at a model of prayer that Jesus gave, and, our Father in heaven, holy is your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, kind of thing. So I take that model and I just say, God, you're great. Everything you do is great. You're friggin' awesome, and, so I just basically take that prayer over, and it's a great elementary place for people to start. But today, my prayer is all day long, because the energy is changing in the space. You can feel it, you can move it, you're spiritually in tune with what's happening. And at some point, I'm like, what the fuck is going on, God? Like, what? Direct me. I don't know what, this has just become chaos. And then just like that, bam, I go, you know what I think you're really trying to say? And then just the whole air changed. But that is a conversation that I'm having with God, that many, many people who walk in the Christian faith are like, how can you disrespect the Lord that way? But for me, it's a conversation. God's in and through everything. And so that's a very snippet of what I have to say about this topic for tonight as an entry.
Okay, cool. Steve, any thoughts?
Well, I believe that God's our creator. He's the father of our spirits. We have earthly parents, and, as such, I believe that everything on earth is modeled after things as they are in heaven, right? So we're in families, we have parents, whatever, they teach us stuff. And, with that, I think God wants to hear from us, just to start off, like right off the bat, wants to hear from us. And when we talk about form and different things like that, I think God just wants to hear from us. He wants to hear what we're scared about, what is frustrating us, our anxieties. He wants to hear our gratitudes. He wants to hear, the questions that we have, and a lot of times, kind of just touching, on Patty's point, is sometimes, it's like, what's going on? I mean, I've got a brother that, is sitting in an ICU bed, and we're like waiting for good news, right? And we're praying like crazy. And, we all got together Thursday night, as a family, and we all knelt down and prayed together out loud. And I fasted for him yesterday and again today. And, I think a lot of it is just, kind of what Patty said too is, I think as humans, we're so arrogant that we have all of the answers to all of the questions. And we totally, as a people, for the most part, discount God's wisdom, his vision, and it's hard when things, go wrong, when things move against us, when, you know, family members are hurting, or we lose somebody, or we lose our business or whatever, and we don't see the whole picture. It's hard, but I really believe that, God wants us to talk out those frustrations with him. He wants to hear the big things, the little things that, we're thankful for. And, there's praying out loud, and then there's having that in your heart all day. I mean, I've got to go to work and function and do stuff, but my brother is, on my thoughts constantly. Every time I get a down second, I'm saying another prayer, and so I've got that prayer in my heart all day. And I think that, there's not really a wrong way to pray. I think, God accepts our feeble contribution, our feeble, offering. And, as we grow in our understanding, as we grow in, our relationship with him, then, that changes and maybe becomes more formal, more something. But I think he just wants us to, check in with him.
Okay, cool. Love it. Love it. Charmaine, any thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I mean, it keys into a lot of what Steve and Patty said, but I think for me, it's a lot about relationship. And I think, really it's about honesty. And I think so much of the time, I know I had a hard time when I was a kid looking at other people praying because it was formal and impersonal. And for me, God is a very personal thing. And I always felt judged by other people when I prayed. And that's really not what it's about. It's not about the other people around you. It's about your personal relationship with him. And I do think, he's a big God. He can handle what you say to him. He's wanting the honesty from you. I mean, he already knows it. It's not like it's a secret, but I think that furthers the relationship when you can come forth honestly and not in a, you know, not in a way where you're, going after God, but more like, challenging him, or this is what I'm struggling with. And when you're honest with it, that's what builds the relationship, I think. And I think, Steve touched on our arrogance. And I had a friend once, say something to me. And I always thought God's not a wishing well, but that's how a lot of people use him. And, a friend of mine said something to me once about how, sometimes we have this idea in our head, and it's kind of like some of the other things we've talked on. We don't know what we don't know. We don't really know what's good for us, but people go to God and they're like, this is what I want. And it's like, what kind of arrogance do we have that we think we know better for ourselves than God has in store for us? And so just that whole idea as well, whenever you're bringing things forward, and, it should be more about building the relationship than asking for, here's how I want you to work things out. And so that's kind of, I guess, my thoughts on it tonight.
I love a lot of the thoughts all of you have shared. And Charmaine, just to piggyback off of a lot of what you said there, saying God is not a wishing well. A lot of people treat God like a genie in a bottle, and that, you can create these spells or incantations that'll make something happen if you say this prayer so many times and stuff. And Master Eckhart, I probably pronounced his name wrong, he said that most people love God the way they love a cow. They love it for the milk and cheese and the profit they gain from her. But if you really want to love God, it has to be without selfish motive, right? And why should it be without selfish motive? Because sometimes it's good we don't get what we think we want. A lot of times it's like our prayers are like a child asking for a rattlesnake for Christmas. It's better that the child goes without it. And a lot of prayers are actually intended to bypass development that serves our greater good. So sometimes, like, our greatest desires and ambitions might actually be great obstacles to our progress, right? We might be looking to get off the hook, or to be able to, some way avoid things that serve the greater purpose for us. So, and another thing I've heard about prayer, Ramana Maharishi said, there's no need to tell God your requirements. He knows them himself and will look after them. Right? So sometimes people will say, do you think God can know and anticipate your needs, or do we have to bring it to God's attention? Right? And Swami Vivekananda said, pray for knowledge and light. Every other prayer is selfish. Right? So a lot of it, and I've applied that, and I've just said, this seems like a bad thing. Can you give me the wisdom to see it the way you see it, in terms of the greater good behind this seemingly chaotic experience in my life? So a lot of times my prayers are just for understanding, but coming out of the gates with humility and trust that there's a good purpose, even if from my limited human perspective, I can't see it. Whereas earlier in life, I can remember times when I felt like maybe resentment to God and this and that for the way that the human story is playing out. And I'm like, this doesn't seem good and this doesn't seem good. So that tends to be a form fault, is treating God like a divine cow, right? Like, I don't think that's good for us, because if it works that way, we get further steeped in our self-limiting idea of ego consciousness, right? Like a child that gets a rattlesnake for Christmas. And then another thing that could be considered a form fault is insincere messaging. So not really knowing what we're saying, right? So you have to believe in the possibility of what you're praying for, and pray in a language that feels natural to you, because if it's repetition of words without feeling or understanding, then the meaning is not as sincere, right? So think about how when somebody flatters you without earning it, right? Like, Patty, you show up at that date. If show up at a first date and the guy's like, oh, you are the smartest girl ever. I really appreciate your intelligence. You're like, why? Because I ordered a mojito? Like, what makes me, I'm not qualified to be getting this compliment right now. Like, this doesn't feel right. Or what happens if they just start to play a tape recording of compliments? You have nice hair. I really like the way it flows in the wind. You smell nice. Like, are you going to take that as, how are you going to receive that? Right? So we want to think about, dry imitation prayers may not be the best form. I mean, or the mockery of half-hearted prayer, or prayer with a wandering mind. And I've heard it interpreted that the whole concept of thou shall not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain is actually can be interpreted as that insincere form of prayer. So
something you said that was interesting. I mean, you were talking about, whether or not it matters, the words that you say. And sometimes I do pray and I say, I don't know how I should pray for this. And I mean, that's literally what I'm saying. But I think the conversation is important, because the conversation, even if it's, in my head or I'm just saying it out loud, is what builds the relationship. So I do think it matters, even if you don't always have the words. And sometimes through the conversation, the words come.
Yeah. And I think it's great I think it's the intention of the heart that the words are really expressing. And I think in that moment, the intention of your heart is humility before your creator. And I feel like that is actually very loving and wise. You don't have to have the right words. It's the intention of the heart that you're leading with in that moment that I think is really beautiful.
And you're showing up, right?
Yeah. Just like, hey, I suck. And unless you make it better, this is the best you're going to get. Like, that's what you could literally say to God. Hey, creator, you know where I'm at in my stage of understanding. Look, you're such a good God. Thank you. That's the best words I can come up with right now, unless you help me become better. Right.
Well,
but that's
and I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think something with that too is that, I think a lot about, how God created us, right? And I was just talking about this, with a friend on Friday morning. And, did he have to create us to where we have to sleep a third of our lives? I mean, think of the crap we could get done if if I'm not tired, dragging all the time, and, the sun never goes down and I can always just keep working and doing something, or, just gross stuff like if I didn't have to puke or, have diarrhea every once in a while in my life. Like, how cool would that be? But, I think that it's, interesting that, God created us to be defective. right? I mean, we're defective by design, you know, our bodies are human, our minds are frail, you know, we get tired, you know. I mean, I'm driving home from Idaho yesterday. You know, I told my wife, you know, I'm gonna have you take over in about an hour because I'm just kind of, you know, I'm getting tired. I just need a mental break. And, you know, even when I was younger, you know, I just can't always go full throttle all the time. You know, I can't do 5,000 push-ups in one set. I can't run, you know, 800 miles without stopping for a water break. And, you know, there's a reason that God created us like that. You know, one is humility, right? So we're going to rely on him when we're tired, when we're stumbling, when we're fatigued, you know, we turn to him for strength and understanding and those kinds of things. You know, and it just, when we acknowledge God's hand in all things, then, you know, a lot of times it can help kind of lift the burden that we're carrying, or help, you know, give us the strength to take a few more steps. And to me, it's interesting that, you know, he designed us that way, instead of making us where we just, whatever I, you know, everything I try, I'm going to be good at. Every shot I take, I'm going to make. You know, I'll go try something like surfing and I'll pop right up like Kelly Slater and just go off awesome. Or I could do a backflip on a motorcycle like Travis Pastrana my first time without breaking my neck. You know, I mean, you know, it's just, but we're not built like that. And he could have made us like that, but he didn't. And he had a wise purpose for it. And I just think that's kind of, you know, interesting how, you know, how he created us with those defects.
And you know, I look at it a bit different. The way I look at it is that the creator is looking across all of space and time.
Right.
So has that kind of a zoomed out perspective. My human life compared against all of eternity is a mere flash in the pan.
Oh, right.
So
Absolutely.
I don't actually feel that I'm qualified to make the judgment of what is defective or what might serve a purpose beyond my limited understanding. So what I would say is like, hey, in my reality right now, this seems defective. But in order, if you want my love, you have to help me understand your ways. Because how can I love what I can't appreciate? So why don't you show me why you did it this way, so I can appreciate it from your perspective. And once I do that, I can actually have the capability for a greater love for you when I understand your ways. So that's the way I approach it. And what I have found is that everything that seemed to me defective or imperfect, I found like a beautiful, mysterious perfection in it over time. But I asked for it. And that was an intention of my prayer. So for me, it's like, I'm not going to stand here point blank and say this shouldn't be that way and that shouldn't be that way. It'd be like, no, I'm actually giving you the benefit of the doubt that my wisdom is the limitation here.
Oh,
not your creative abilities. So that's the way I've approached it. And I don't know whether that's right or wrong, Steve, but
no, I get it. And you know, with that, I think there's, you know, God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't, you know, things are the way they are. The earth is created the way it is. It's tilted the way it is. It's the distance from the sun for specific purposes. And, you know, compared to how we existed before this mortal experience that we're having, I mean, I kind of think of it sometimes as, you know what, this earth that we're on, you know, whatever we call our home, whatever city we live in, whatever cabin we stay at, whatever, the reality is this is a rest stop, because we existed for who knows how long before I was born 50 years ago and came out screaming, and 50 years ago, and I'm still screaming. And, you know, I mean, for me, you know, I realized a couple of years ago, I'm more than halfway through my natural earthly life. You know, I mean, I just turned 50 and there's no way, you know, I really don't believe that I'll live to be 100 years old, and I really don't want to.
What?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my calves might carry me through. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. My calves
With
might
calves like that? Come on.
you know, but then when it's gone, I'm back to, you know, a perfected state. And, you know, those kinds of things. And like you said, it's a just a blink of an eye in all the eternities, you know, of things. And so it's, you know, but it's interesting that, you know, we were perfect beings and now we're put in a state of, it's just different, you know, where we feel things, we go through emotions, we have our limitations, but also our strengths that we brought with us. And so it's just interesting to me how, you know, how all of that works, and even the variety in the earth of all the things, right? The mountains, the rivers, the creeks, all the birds that, you know, Brendan's out there feeding and petting, and all the chipmunks and everything, you know, around. But like I got to go to the aquarium with my grandkids on Friday, and penguins are my favorite bird. And so they have this penguin exhibit. There's like 31 penguins in there, 21, something like that. And I go in there and I watch these little suckers walk around all being weird, you know, and whatever. And I just cracked me up. Like I was just laughing, having such a good time watching my favorite little midget bird walk around being all goofy. And then they get in the water and start swimming like torpedoes, and they got jet streams and jumping out of the water. And, you know, just God could have put us on a plain, flat earth that had no color, had no smell, had no wind, sunsets, you know, but he didn't. You know, he put us on a beautiful earth that has beauty for everybody. You know, there's variety in things for everybody. And I think that's awesome.
Love it. Love it. And that's a lot of what we talked about in the knowing conversation last week, is all about the divine architect. There's intention and intelligence behind the design of a penguin, just as a watch has a watchmaker that conceived and put all the gears together. Everything from the way it swims to the way it waddles was intentional by design.
Yeah.
And it's all about creating a relationship with that designer. Because if you think penguins are cool, you should see the other designs that designer came up with.
Right.
Right. Like, and there's no end to it. So this is all about how to build a relationship with that. And, you know, if I'm having this conversation with somebody who isn't really spiritually inclined, right? I tell people right out of the gates, before you start to incorporate divine therapy, which is what I call this, I say, choose a concept of the higher power, God or creator that you can love. You need some sort of an avatar you can create a relationship with, because human intellect cannot grasp the absolute, and you can't love what you cannot apprehend. But since all images and representations are a part of the creator or are a part of God and are from God, God can be grasped by any one of them. So that you can choose an image like an old guy with a gray beard, fine. Divine mother, a wise yogi, a spiritual master, or Whoopi Goldberg hanging out on a park bench. Like, you can choose whatever you want, but it makes it easier for human intellect to grasp and create relationship if you have that. And then after that, there's 7 techniques I consider for divine therapy. That I teach 7 techniques, and none of these are, this isn't all my own original stuff or anything. So I'm going to reference the sources as I go through it. But I think there's really like 7 components to prayer. And it's like having each of the 7 satisfied, right? So technique tip number 1 is to start by giving thanks or expressing gratitude. And the reason for this, it's largely even psychological. It's the more you count your blessings, the more there will be to count, right? If you can't appreciate all you have now, what's the point in being blessed with more, right? And part of this dance between creator and creation is being able to appreciate what the creator's doing so you can do the dance. If you're not appreciating, what's the point in dancing, right? Like, so that's, I feel like that is part of this whole process. And that's there with intention, is to practice gratitude, right? It also helps to give you immunity against emotions like jealousy, depression, entitlement, all of which I believe are actually spiritual sickness, which can result from a deficiency of gratitude, right? So I think there's a lot of healthy spiritual and mental reasons by starting out with that. It's also helpful and encouraging to remind ourselves that we're supported in unimaginable numbers of ways, being grateful for electricity or running water or sunshine or friends, or the novelty in nature that we can always be enchanted with, right? So every time I pray, it's like I start out of the gates with just being able to perceive the things I can be grateful for. And even the expressions of the Creator's love, which is something to be grateful for, whether that's in the form of patience, mercy, support, looking at how much the sun has contributed to our existence. Can we ever repay the sun or repay nature? And even being grateful for the problems which give us the opportunity to become better. I think, blessed are those who are tested. How else are you going to get strong, right? And get better, right? So, and thanks for the wisdom. So I start out with just giving thanks or expressing gratitude. That's technique tip number 1. Anyone have any thoughts or anything on that technique tip?
I would just add to it. I think it's important to honor that, or to acknowledge that God is all knowing and all powerful. It sets, like, thank you, God, for who you are. I mean, you're just acknowledging that we don't know it all. Otherwise we're going to God as if, hey, I need, and it doesn't work that way. When we come with a posture of, man, you know it all, you got it all, that's it, doesn't get any better than that. And out of that is a gratitude, right? This attitude of gratitude that comes. But I think we're not on a level playing field with this spiritual aspect of our Creator.
Mm-hmm. I love everything you just said. And that's actually going to be one of the later technique tips, is basically what you said. Yeah. And it does bring more gratitude. So love it. Love it. So now technique tip number 2. And is, I would say, asking for help in loving God the way God loves you. And I say this, look, you know way more about me than I know about you. This is unfair. Let's balance the score. Help me love you the way you love me, right? I'm challenging you, like, just show up in my life, help me increase my understanding, in terms of loving you the way you love me. And I think that's the one thing God doesn't have, unless we choose to give it, is our love. But I feel like actually asking for help in doing that with good form, and just saying, hey, look, I don't even think I'm capable enough to do that properly, because I don't even really know what the heck you are or how to really understand you. Like, I mean, if you were a penguin on a throne, it'd be really easy to relate to you, but I don't know how to relate to the all that is everything without borders, right? Like, it's like, so we can actually ask for help in that, right? I think the most excellent prayer is for God, him or herself, right? St. Francis of Assisi said, please show me the right and true way to follow you. And that was really what inspired this technique tip. I'm like, really what he's saying is, help me love you the way you love me, right? Or help me to love you in the way you want me to love you. What's your love language? Like 5 love languages, like Gary Chapman? Like, let me know. Like, how do you want me to do this thing, right? And I think one of the best ways we can love God is just live our life doing our best, right? So I think that's technique tip number 2. And I think it took me the vast majority of my life to even realize that was an important thing to ask for on a consistent basis, right? But I feel like, in my life, that has been answered and continues to be answered at an increasing level as I've continued to show sincerity with that request, right?
So since you say that, can I ask you something? I mean, you were almost joking about whether or not God has a love language, but he's such a personal God. Do you feel like maybe our languages are kind of like, he communicates to us through our languages, and so he almost wants that reciprocated in our personal relationship? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that if it's going to sound really hard to grasp this, but I feel like God is love, and that all love is just an expression of God. But I feel like God loves the novelty of love being expressed in all these crazy fun ways, right? So I think it's all about just having fun with the idea of expressing love and mixing it up and just having fun with the whole process. That's what I think, right? So but that's a great question. That's a great question. So that's technique tip number 2. I also throw in help me love the creation the way you love the creation. And I'd say, and included in that is unconditional love for all beings and people, because how cool would it be to live in this reality if I can appreciate and love everyone the way you do, right? Like, I don't want to hate people and judge people and be resentful and impatient towards people. I don't want to live that way. So, I want to use my free will to ask for the ability to continue to grow in my love the way you love everybody, right? And I found that prayer has been progressively answered as well. Like, just being able to just almost just love people easier, more authentically without expecting anything, and being able to appreciate people, like getting better at appreciating people, that the kinds of people I wouldn't have appreciated before, right? Rather than judging like who's worthy of acceptance and love, it's now like, I need to figure out why they are worthy of acceptance and love. Like, that's my immediate go-to process. Like, if there's a block there, I had a saying that I think 99% of people are interesting. And then the other 1% are interesting simply because of how uninteresting they are, right? Like, that is actually like super fun too in its own way. So, yeah, that's another request.
I think when it comes to praying for, God's creation, that and everything, that encompasses, I don't pray for patience. Well, I pray for patience.
You're never supposed to.
Patience. I pray for patience. Because if I prayed for strength, I'd probably have to pray for bail money. But I think for me, when you talk about creation, there is this anchor that is rooted, I believe, in the spirit of creation that is inherently embedded in every human being, and that is to love. And so there is so much junk that gets thrown on top of that when you see people that aren't operating out of that, which has been inherently placed in us, then it becomes difficult to love because it doesn't appear to be there. So I come from a perspective when I look at creation through the lens of love. And today, I'm getting upset at this conversation that's going on because it's so convoluted, and I probably should have cleaned it up by asking for wisdom, but I didn't. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I need something here. I don't know what's happening, but I gotta rein this in real quick. So, but it's out of a place of love that I wanted to direct what was happening there. I wasn't actually judging anybody, but I always say you can see the action, but you got to look underneath for the motive. And a lot of times when people are not acting appropriately, is because they haven't been loved, or they don't have an understanding of it, or they're so far removed from it. So extending loving kindness seems to help, facilitate that in a way of loving creation. So I loved, Brendan, how you talked about creation there for a moment. And I just want to pontificate on that for a second about the center core for that for me, which is.
I love that you chimed in there. And one of the ways I look at it is that all vices, whether it's greed, pride, anger, all of this stuff, is all just symptomatic of love deficiency. Love deficiency syndrome, straight up. And the best way to get love is to give love first. That's the way it works. You get it by giving it. Give and you shall receive. And so people are out there and they're using their free will, as we all have, and they're experimenting with different ways to get what they truly want within the depths of their soul. And so I look at that like the same way we stumble and fall as we're children learning to walk. We are spiritual beings that are here trying to figure out how to grow into, being children of the Creator and being as loving and wise as the Creator. And we experiment with bad form, but one of the best ways to truly learn is through experience, and especially through the experience of what doesn't work. So a lot of times I look at it like, if I see somebody doing something that's like really obviously like wrong, I look at it like, oh, it's so cute. Like almost like the same way you would with a kid. It's like they're experimenting with that level of understanding, but that's progress, because I know that strategy for living, being greedy or angry or moody, it doesn't keep its promise of what you think you will gain by acting that way. And eventually you will learn. I mean, through experience, and experience is a very memorable teacher, and suffering is one of the best teachers. Like, we don't forget that suffering. So I'm like, it's cute. We're all on that journey, and we all struggle with our bumps and bruises as we go, and we step on each other's feet. But I almost, I almost try to look at it and I always try to see myself in terms of, can I remember when I used to think that way? Or I used to think talking to somebody that way was appropriate. And I almost try to look at them as an earlier version of me and try to love them that way. Be like, yeah, that's cool. Like we don't judge grade 1 students and grade 2 students because, they can't calculate their taxes or do adult functions, right? And I feel like we often expect other beings to be more advanced than they are, only because it would make life more comfortable for us if they were. And that's ego. Ego always wants the more comfortable thing, right? Not realizing that we should endure a fair bit of discomfort from others as others have endured from us, because that's how we all learn best, through the uncomfortable stuff, right?
So Patty, what you just brought up though, I mentioned to Brendan earlier that I finished a book, Attached, earlier today. And one of the things they were talking about is how you respond to people in moments where they're bringing something forward and saying, I don't like this or whatever, they have some complaint, and they can bring it forward in a way that's really like, here is how I'm feeling about this, or trying to express their needs. But a lot of times that's not how it comes out. It comes out like a complaint. It comes out very negative. It comes out like an attack. And just the way you tied it to love there brought a whole new element of it for me. Just thinking about the way God responds to that, because they were talking about, if you're really in a secure place and you don't take the bait and you don't take it like an attack on you, and you're able to actually hear what they're really saying to you and what the real problem is and what their real need is, you can respond to it in a completely different way. And I just think about having those conversations with God, and God doesn't respond to us in a hostile way. He doesn't take, the bait that we give him. And just how that can be such a good idea for a model of how we respond to people. And if we truly see them in love, and we're not seeing, the words they're saying, but we're seeing, the suffering in their heart and where that's coming from, it gives us a totally different response and reaction to them. And tying that to love brought it like full circle for me. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Love it. So another technique tip that I use is to ask God to reveal God's self, to show us God's ways. Because how can you love what you don't know? You can't love a secret admirer. Eventually you got to say, like, look, come out of hiding, right? Reveal yourself so I can know you better and love you better. And that was the whole conversation of last week, was entirely that technique tip. It deserved its whole 2-hour conversation in terms of how we can actually engage with that. But it's like, literally, like, stop being such a secret admirer, hiding behind everything. Like, I know you invented the penguin, and you had me at penguin. You don't need to do any more, right, Steve? So it's like, I want to know the inventor of the penguin. Also, you invented something cool called chipmunks, and you make them stuff food in their cheeks. Like, they were already cute enough, but with these big puffed up cheeks takes it to a whole new level. And when they run away, like, the peanuts rattle like a little cha-cha shaker. Super cute. And the racing stripes, I love it all. So, it's we could go on and on. Like, appreciating the creation is one of the coolest actual pastimes, right? And that's why I love nature. It's the infinite entertainer. Like, getting out with animals and birds and all, and you don't know what animal is going to show up on any given day. And it's like, look what the creator made. Look at this thing, right? Or look at that thing, So I always ask for that. Just reveal yourself. Straight up, just reveal yourself. I'm asking you, come out of hiding. You've impressed me enough. You invented the penguin. Time to come out of hiding. That's all you had to do. Okay, stop hiding. Like, let's go. If you want my love, you actually have to reveal yourself. Okay, so it's almost like calling God out on that. Stop hiding behind everything after all this stuff. Now I'm asking you, so it's different. So the next technique tip I would go on to, number 5, would be to ask to be redeemed so that you can redeem others. So it's basically like saying, God, please use me as a blessing for other people. I actually can't think of a more fulfilling way to live my life than to be used as a blessing for other people. Now, you could say, give me wisdom and love so that I can share that wisdom and love with others. I'd like to just be a middleman for you. Like, I think that would be the coolest job. So, and I don't think anything brings us more fulfillment than to find our happiness in the happiness of others. And Yogananda said, change no circumstances of my life, change me. That was his prayer to God. Change no circumstances of my life, change me, is really saying that I'm giving you benefit of the doubt that everything in my life is set up from the place of highest love and highest intelligence. And the only thing that's lacking is my ability to appreciate it and appreciate the skill behind what you're pulling off here, right? And you can also say, like, give me the courage to meet the challenges of life, the endurance to go on, even when things aren't changing, and the wisdom to know what must be done, so, and just make God responsible for all that, right? So that would be another technique. And even modern day thinkers, Tony Robbins has said that basically, I think for the last 30 years, he's asked God every day to use him as a blessing. Right? I remember him saying that once. He said, I've said this every day for the past 30 or maybe 40 years. I said, God, please use me as a blessing. Just use me as a blessing. That's all I want. Right? And I feel like he has been used as a blessing in many countless ways. Right? So that would be technique tip number 5. Any thoughts on that? All right, let's go on to number 6. Number 6 is my favorite of them all. Okay. Number 6 is my favorite because the more I have said this one, the more it has just given me like unbreakable inner peace, like just and radical acceptance for everything in life, and just really reinforce life is happening for me. So number 6 is basically giving free will back to God to just use my life for whatever plans you have or want for my life. And so I would just say, you know what, God, I completely surrender to your will, no matter where it takes me in life. Now that's the key, because a lot of people will say, like, and it's as Patty said earlier, thy will be done, not my will be done, but thy will be done. It's like saying, God, I want to go along with whatever your best plan is for this life, but I'm doing it with no exceptions. Because a lot of people will create exceptions, like, no, I wasn't supposed to have this job. I should be married by now or have kids or blah, blah. They come up with all these exceptions to what they think should be the master plan. But reminding myself, no matter where it takes me in life, that makes me totally cool with wherever I end up showing up in life. Wherever I live or whatever my job is or whatever life looks like, I'm rolling with that and being like, look, I gave you the steering wheel. I said, you direct this life. So if we're here, this means you meant for me to be here. Right? So the key is to say it and mean it. And then in doing that, you can have radical acceptance for the things in life you can't control. And whatever comes of its own, you can just accept it. Right? Because after all, is God loving? Yes. And if you don't totally feel that with every cell in your being, look for all the evidence of it. Is God intelligent? Yeah. Look at all the intricacies of ecosystems and outer space and the human body, all this stuff, right? And why not let God direct our lives? Like, we're almost like actors in a movie that are saying, like, I got a better idea for this character. It's like, why not let the producer who set this whole thing up, like, actually had a role for you that was going to be way cooler than what you can possibly imagine for yourself, right? I'm like, I just trust the will of God more than I trust myself. I'm like, just whatever it is, like, because at times I thought things would be great for me and they weren't. And I thought things wouldn't be good for me and turned out they were. And so I'm like, I don't even trust my own preferences anymore on anything. I'm like, forget it. I'm done with living by my will all the time and seeing where that gets me in a human life. Right. So it's instead of selfish preferences, I think asking for God's preferences are actually our higher preferences, untainted by confusion and delusion. I think that is actually our highest preferences for ourselves. I would tell you that that's your purest selfish intention, is actually God's intention for your life. You know, we're not really free if we're following what the ego tells us to do. We think we have free will, but it's like, we're not really free. We're just slaves to this thing called ego all the time, you know, that leads with this thought of what's in it for me and everything else. So I think life will just always disappoint and disillusion us if we're doing it only for ourselves. I mean, eventually we got to leave behind everything in this life anyways. So I think we should just surrender to the preferences of the divine producer that understands everything across all space and time and totality in terms of what matters most with our time here. Right? And I surrender my thoughts, inspirations, motivations, everything. I just say, direct my thoughts and my motives and all of it. I want you to just take control of all of it. I think the secret is just saying, like, just do what you want with me and just trusting that. Right? I think it's almost, it's so rare that and Yogananda said that it's so rare that people would give the precious gift of complete soul surrender to the creator. He said it's actually so rare for that to truly happen. People can say it, but once again, it's insincere messaging, but to actually like mean it, I think he said it was such a rare thing. But I think it's good to just say, look, let me do my best I can for you. The result is in your hands, and just leave it at that. And I feel like just saying that actually brings me a lot of peace and radical acceptance for life. You know, I feel like right away when I started saying that, I'm like, I could feel the results literally within a week with divine therapy. I'm like, I feel so free now. Like it almost feels like a huge weight has been lifted, probably the weight of egotism, but it's like just getting rid of as much of it as I can. But it was actually like so freeing to just do that. And I do divine therapy twice a day, morning and at night, 2 appointments a day. I think that's the key dosage. Because if you're doing this stuff, but you do it like once a week, well, if you're taking healing medicine, but you aren't taking it in the right frequency or dosage, can you really expect a healing result? And I think that's a component of this that people can get confused on. And I've certainly been confused on and experienced that. Right? So I think it's all about trusting the path that's placed before us, even if it's not what we from our individual selves wanted or not. I think your deepest, truest will and God's will are actually one and same. Right? That God wants for you what you ultimately want for you, but just don't know yet. You know, because we're confused and we're so limited in our perspective. So that's technique tip number 6. Any thoughts on that? All right, we'll go on to.
I was just going to say real quick, I think, you know, Tony Robbins talked a lot about, you know, meaning, the meaning that we attach to things, you know, our experiences or whatever. And, you know, life happens for me, not to me, you know, those types of things. And I think when, you know, we get to a point that we can hand over our free will, because that's really the only thing that we absolutely own, right? Is our free will, our attitude, however you want to call it. But that's the one thing that, you know, we can hand it over to God. We can rebel against God. We could be, you know, somewhere in the middle. But that's really the one thing that we have that's ours, that we have to give. And I think when, you know, the times, because I, you know, kind of, you know, bouncing around the path, hitting the, the bumpers at the bowling alley, kind of thing, trying to get down the lane and knock some pins down. And, the times that I've been good at doing that, the results are always better than what, I could have done if I just said, no, this is how I have to do it. This is where we need to go. This is how we have to do it. And I think the key for me and all that is just to get to that point, and then not leave it. But it definitely is that thing that I think gives all meaning, gives all clarity, because that is the one thing, that God gave us that we can give back to him.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And the next point, the final point I would say is, technique tip number 7 is I just say, look, you can test me with it, whatever you want, but do not test me with forgetfulness of you or your love. That's where I'm putting my foot down. Okay, test me with whatever you want, but not forgetfulness of you and your love, right? Like, I don't want to forget that, So I make that request. That keeps me free from spiritual doubt, negativity, temptation, distraction, evil desires that may lure us away from spiritual awareness, helps us stay true to our spiritual teacher, and keeps our willpower and focus strong enough to meet our tests. So that was inspired by Sri Gayana Mata. She said, do not test me with forgetfulness of thy love, in her book, God Alone. Rajarsi Janakananda also said the most destructive shaft of Maya delusion is unwillingness to meditate, and thus to prevent oneself from tuning in with God and Guru, which basically just means that the thing that steeps us most in wrong judgments and wrong perspective in life is unwillingness to connect with the Creator. Almost like plants that have been uprooted, like we need to be planted back into that source in order to grow properly, right? And Yogananda would say, God, please make yourself more tempting than temptation. Keep me wanting to know you despite all the challenges and tests. May I never permit the blind ego in me to obstruct the soul, right? So these are all different ways that people applied what I consider technique tip number 7. And we can all apply this in our own way. And so we've got the 7 techniques. And what I have suggested to people is consider applying some or all of those techniques and create your own unique prayer formula recipe, right? Put it in your own words with whatever themes you like. You're like, okay, I like this one. I like this one. I'm going to try this one. Maybe I'm not ready for that one. That's cool, right? And then I'd say apply it twice a day, and then test and realize and see the results for yourself, right? See what actually happens. Like, let the results speak for themselves. I wouldn't tell you just do this blindly and just close your eyes of wisdom and reason. I'd be like, no, actually, like, see that this will work and see the changes in yourself when you start to do this, right? As needed, you can update or revise your form on this to best match the evolution of your spiritual journey, right? And I think, Steve, you mentioned it first of all. You said that, this mortal world is not the ultimate reality. And I believe that, dreams, we spend a lot of time dreaming, and some people think it's a waste. And I think it's actually a constant reminder that this isn't the ultimate reality, because we have these regular experiences existing in a different state of existence, of consciousness, like tuning into a different station on a radio. It's like we can exist in all these other different states of existence. Like, we're not limited to just this earthly, like, material realm. Although we tend to get caught up in the hypnosis that this is the be all and end all. And that's usually where our troubles really start to manifest, is when we think that way, because it's all ashes to ashes, dust to dust anyway. We don't want to get super attached to this realm, right? And then, but we should keep on with our worldly duties, but do it in partnership with God and just being filled with the confidence that God will use you, right? And enjoy just participating in this cosmic drama with God, whatever God's sending you, accept it without judgment, failures, defeats, everything that happens. And Yogananda said something that along the lines of, let the storms rage, let the worlds break apart, just love God more. That was his answer to every single aspect of non-acceptance. Every time it's like life is happening to me, it's like, no, the answer is to just love God more, right? If it's like, this shouldn't be happening to my family and friends. No, the answer is to just love God more. Like, that is the simple answer. And then in doing that, you will gain the wisdom you need so that your problems are no longer seen as problems, right? In fact, they might even be seen as blessings. Like, how much of a miracle is that, right? So, and I think be unconditionally loving and patient. Like, sometimes we have these timelines we put on things where we're like, I want my life fixed yesterday, but it's like, just think of how long God has waited for you. Potentially many, many lifetimes, right? Like, we don't know what happened before this lifetime and how many lifetimes we've been playing around with our delusions like kids with mud pies, thinking it's all fun and just really, really celebrating and worshiping the ego consciousness, right? So there was a couple of quotes that I really liked that I heard about prayer, and I saved them. One's from Richard Rohr, and his was, it's not that we pray and God answers, it is that our praying is already God answering within us and through us. God seems to plant within us the desire to pray for what God already wants to give us, and even better. And I thought that was awesome, because some of the ways God shows up is through the virtuous desires that come through us, right? That's another way of God playing hide and seek. And then Paramahansa Yogananda said, God came with you in the beginning and has been with you all the time. He alone will be with you when you go. Make peace with him now, right? Like, it's your eternal best friend. Like, and divine therapy is all about, making a very sincere effort to really optimize the relationship between creator and creation. And in doing that, you can live in the creation with good form without our judging the moment or judging the timelines in life, and then getting all rattled because from our limited view of all space and time and eternity, we think things aren't going according to plan, or, and we're like, God, you screwed this up. I was supposed to get that job because I earned it, and so you better check and pay more attention here. Hello, anybody home? Like, what kind of, I think about some of the ways I've thought in my life, and it's almost laughable and comical. So that's divine therapy. It's just, these are ideas on how to, ideas that can be applied, that I've been inspired through other sources, that I apply a couple times a day. It's worked super well for me. It's one of the most important aspects of my life, I think. And I'm just sharing it because I think there's great capacity for this to create greater levels of patience, greater levels of inner peace. I mean, without inner peace, what good is life? You can have all the success in the world, but without inner peace, you're still in a living hell, right? So that's divine therapy. Key takeaways or thoughts. Charmaine, look how cute that is right now.
She's always full of love.
Almost as cute as a penguin, eh, Steve?
Almost.
Almost as cute as a reggae dragonfly.
Did you see that? How did you know what I've been up to? I didn't think you knew what I've been up to. The reggae dragonfly. Oh, man. All right, who wants to share their thoughts on divine therapy?
Thank you for the handout for this evening. I am reading this quote from the ancient text that I referred to earlier, the Bible, and this has come from the book of Mark, and the chapter is 12, and it says, these religious people are getting together and they're like, what's the greatest commandment? Like what is it? And he said, the Lord your God is one, meaning that is the divine nature. It's where all the energy comes from. It's where the spirit comes from. The God is one. And then he said, so love God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence and energy. And here's the second, love others as well as you love yourself. Like as well as you love yourself, love others. And as you continue to love God more, you love yourself more. Like you said, show me how you love me so that I can love myself, right? And then just being able to take that a step further and then lay that over, as well as I love myself as well as I can love others. And so I want to continue to connect with the spirit of creation, that divine nature that's there, that energy that's there that has created everything, so that in the crux of that, not even the crux, but in the foundation of that is love. And so I just really enjoyed tonight's talk, and I loved being able to lay over in my mind how I have expanded on what's commonly known as the Lord's Prayer in layman, to read through it is just ridiculous. It's one of the things I'm trying to cut out of Christianity, one person at a time, which is take this and personalize it for yourself so that you can come to a place of the all-knowing God and be grateful for it and say, hey, give me everything that I need for the day because you already have it figured out. And so all of those things. So I'm really grateful for tonight's talk.
What's really ironic?
Hard to tell.
That what you just referenced was the original inspiration for me building this handout.
That is the original inspiration that's built my whole ministry.
Okay, good. Because I was just like, all right, well, if we gotta start with God first, I gotta figure out how that looks and where do I begin? And I probably begin with the communication. And I gotta collect as much research as I can and wisdom and so that. I love that you came out of the gates with that. I'm like, that's actually why I ended up creating this handout.
I've read this tonight in the Message version. It's read in several other versions, but I just think you have, from a broader sense, I'm coming at it from a Christian perspective, but not all of our clients come to us from a Christian perspective. And I think if you take off the religion cap of that, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just spoken in different ways and it's an understanding, but there's still the divine, and you can get wrapped up in a lot of little things that kind of fizzer off from that, but love's at the core of it, and you can't deny creation and that which is in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things with and it is interesting you highlight the differences in the ways that we may teach or guide people through essentially the same thing, is that we're meeting people at different levels of receptivity, right? And then relating to their reality, and when I'm doing this and I'm talking to people, I'm usually not using the word God. Like I'm using the word divine or the loving intelligence of the universe, but also knowing that all of these concepts are at root the same thing, that God can be grasped by any one of them. So I'm like, let's just use a concept that works for you where you're at right now, right? And just accept where you're at. And because I think that's a beautiful expression in itself. Just your own unique way of connecting to this supreme intelligence behind everything, right? Love it. Steve, what are your thoughts on divine therapy?
No, I love it. I think number 7 was really good. I just like the way it was phrased, because I think as humans, definitely for me, personally, as an individual, I forget. And it's a constant battle to remember, right? And I think that is one of the things that, God could have given me a perfect memory, but then would I need to turn to him all the time, right? I wouldn't, if I could always just remember it. And so I just like how it was phrased to, don't test me with forgetfulness of you and your love. And I think that's, when things are going well, it's easy to feel like God loves us. When things start going sideways, when you feel like, you're in an outhouse that got flipped upside down and then lit on fire, and you go, ah, crap, man, Brennan wants me to remember what's good about this. What can I learn? What could be better? But, it's just always remembering, and that's one of the things I, in keeping a daily journal for the last 30 years is trying to, find something every day at the end of my journal, every day for the last, I don't know how many years it's been, 7, 8 years. I write this last thing and it's called God's Evidence. And I have to find something from the day that showed me that God's real, that he exists, that he is omnipotent, he's all powerful, he's all knowing. And sometimes it's, the sunrise, sometimes it's seeing a deer, sometimes it's getting to see the penguins. And it's a lot of different things. And it's just making myself stop and remember to look for that and holding myself accountable to that, because he's always there. I'm not always there.
Mhm.
And that's what I have to remember, is to be there. And I will have you know, as a sidebar, as I close this out, that I have several reminders on my phone, alarms that go off every 3 hours that say, remember what you need to remember.
Yeah.
Review 3 weeks ago.
And that's so cool, because it is our free will, right? Remembering what needs to be remembered. And then what's most important to remember, right? We've been told God alone is most important to remember.
Yeah.
And then everything else comes after that.
Right.
Right. And I think you can try to experiment with living by different values, but I feel like those who have lived by that value in a true, authentic way, the masters have really shown how to live a human life with top form. Right. I think there's enough evidence out there that my calves are awesome. Penguins rule. Steve's throwing in his proposed Instagram account names into the chat after I suggested burning upside down outhouse as a breakthrough Instagram account, which I would follow if you did start it, right? Like, I mean, you never know how these jokey things can progress into something meaningful in life. That's the fun of it. And God's Evidence was the subject of last week's conversation.
Awesome.
So that's why I was like, oh, that's technique number 4 is finding that evidence. Right. So, all right, Charmaine, thoughts, key takeaways from tonight? Gosh,
there were a lot. I think one of the things that really kind of reached me was talking about praying to be used as a blessing. I'm not sure I've ever thought of praying that way myself before. I mean, I've talked before about sometimes feeling compelled to deliver a message and learning to have obedience to whenever I feel that compelling, but to actually ask for it is something I don't think I've been bold enough to do. And so that's something I always appreciate it when I've been used as a blessing. I don't know why I've never thought to ask for it. But sometimes I think a lot of what we discussed today that's different than how I might pray normally is I think there's a lot of boldness in it. I mean, it's challenging to God in a way that makes us better too. We're challenging him to help us understand him more, to help us understand others more. but there's a boldness that I don't think I've had. And so I think that's kind of what I took away tonight, kind of looking at all of the items together and how it really impacts me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that bold, and I like the way you described it as a boldness, is almost like really the application of free will to loving and understanding God. It's like, okay, enough of this ambiguity. I know I can get caught around in all these worldly distractions, but I'd rather stop playing with the toys and let's get to know the toy maker, right? Like behind creation. Because I think if everything in creation is super cool, from like the beautiful crystals that are in the ground and the gorgeous flowers and birds and everything else, I'm like, just imagine how much more impressive the actual creator and inventor of all this stuff is. I'm like, I'm like, I've had enough with the toys. Let's meet the toy maker, right? Like, you've done enough. This is good enough. Don't distract me with all these silliness. Okay, so and there's a number of conversations we can have in future that can really help with some of these attitudes we talked about here today. And one is on how to dissipate your desires for all these other things that pull us off the path. I think that is one of the most useful skills as a human being, is knowing how to nullify all of these desires that distract us and consume us, and in some ways are just super overrated and just bring more troubles and difficulties in our lives. All these wrong paths to what we truly want. There's an art and science to it, and that'll be a conversation in future. And I think also we didn't talk about it yet, humility hygiene. I think having a good process for humility hygiene enables us to be used as a blessing without it destroying us. Because it's kind of like, you know how I said a kid asking for a rattlesnake for Christmas may not be good. Sometimes we might want to be used as a blessing, but if it's going to get to our head and we're going to think that we're the sole creators of these blessings, then it's actually more destructive and more harmful than anything. So we actually really need to, I believe, as a prerequisite to being utilized, we really need to do the best we can with cultivating greater humility. Because otherwise,
that's such a good point.
It'll just go to the ego. Yeah.
Because I mean, I've talked before about feeling compelled to say something, and in those instances, I felt free to say something, but not be attached to how that gets implemented. My job is to deliver the message, and I feel very comfortable in that. But I do feel like if I get too entwined, sometimes that's hard for me. If I'm not seeing, the results, I get very discouraged, or I take it more personally. I have a harder time maintaining that distance to kind of deliver and get out. I mean, not get out, but separate myself from the result. It's harder the more involved you are, for me.
That is such a big point in terms of especially just separating ourselves from the result, knowing that sometimes people have to be willing. They have to apply their free will to a harmonious conclusion on things. They have to be capable, right? They have to be healthy enough to be able to perceive things accurately, right? And even still, sometimes our job is to be in a position to hold firm to a value so that somebody has to live through the consequences of whatever they're choosing to do, the wrong path, right? And knowing that it might be a full out lifetime of them going down the wrong path, so that in future their soul, to the depths of their soul, they have this inclination that this way of being is wrong. They might need a full lifetime of suffering. Like, we may need to accept that might be our role, that we may never be able to see, even from this lifetime, how us standing our ground on this one issue serves a greater purpose in terms of perfection of character in that person's journey, right?
And having the wisdom in that moment to know what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I find that if we don't, sometimes the wisdom in the moment is just saying, give me the wisdom to know what I'm supposed to do, or I'm going to screw this thing up, right? Like, sometimes that's the wisdom. It's like right away, like, all right, if you're not giving me like a deep soul knowing of what to say right now, I'm asking you for it, or I'm not going to do anything right now because I don't want to screw this thing up, right? But that's humility once again. It's just like, just use me on this. Honestly, like, I'm just a hollow tube. Just whatever message needs to come through, just use me on this. I'll try to empty myself of ego. But anyway, all right. So that's divine therapy. I attached a PDF handout in there that has my collected notes on this subject, so you guys can use it, and obviously share the recording. I'll post the recording on YouTube so that can complement it, because sometimes it's just and it's funny because we weren't going to talk about this tonight, but we ended up, because of Patty came on and we're just like, this is the direction we're going tonight. All right. I didn't even know if we would ever talk about this, but that's the way it rolls sometime. So Patty, you'll be back on September 13th. Nice. Okay. So let's do a go team on 3. And before we do, I think all of you have been used as a blessing for whoever might be watching the recording right now. Just in a way of sending love and wisdom, just by showing up today and being a part of this conversation and just sharing your thoughts with your current level of understanding gives great relatability to other people that are at the same level as you, that might be asking or sharing the same things as you. So I feel like all of you have really brought something powerful and unique and special to tonight's conversation. And I feel like, human beings, we often major in minor things, right? As has often been said. But I think tonight was a conversation on one of the most major of things. So
Thank you so much for facilitating such a great topic for tonight.
Awesome.
Absolutely. It's an honor and pleasure. And we're all in this together. Once again, making the best of this human experience as we can. Let's do a go team on 3, group hug, we're out. All right. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go
Go
team.
team! Love you guys and everybody watching. Woo!
You guys.